Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, this is going to be a fun episode, an amazing episode. Guys, we have answers to most of the world's problems in this episode. So make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell. My brother Jim, he's amazing. He's changing the world. I can't say more. So many things about this man. He's changing. He's actually helping people getting healthy, living more abundantly. So, Jim, welcome to the show, brother.
Well, thank you. Come back, Coach. It's great to be on your show, Richard. I appreciate the time. And what I'm very excited about, very inspired about, is sharing this message with everybody who is able to listen. We have the solution. In fact, Victor Hugo said, there's one thing stronger than all of the armies of the world, and that is an idea whose time has come. What I'm going to share today on your show is the idea whose time has come. And it's the most logical, relevant idea that I've ever heard. And it's very simple. I'm just going to say it. Food forests everywhere equals freedom. And a lot of people hear that and they're like, that doesn't make sense to me. We'll unpack how it makes sense during the show today.
All right, I love it because I was in the health and fitness industry for 30 years, and I also know that the best way to get healthy is to eat natural food. To eat, eat our medicine. And a lot of people think, well, if I got inflammation, I'm just going to take an anti-inflammatory. No, why don't you mix up a little turmeric, little curcumin in your foods? It'll help with, inflammation. So a lot of people don't realize a lot of drugs are actually made from food. And so food should be our drug, but we kind of got away from that. So I want to talk about that a little bit. But first, tell us a little bit about, where you come from, where did you grow up, and how did you become the man that you are today?
So I grew up in Minnesota, and I've had these pivotal moments throughout life. I became a wrestler when I was in about 5th grade. And at first, when I started wrestling, I was there and I liked it because my dad was a wrestler and I had some family history to it. And the coach came up. His name was Tony Nelson. His son just won the NCAAs a few years back. And he said, Jim, I think you could be a good wrestler, but you just don't listen. And I was maybe 10 years old or something, 11 years old. And for some reason, I remember that moment so well because I decided at that moment that when a coach is talking to me, I'm going to listen. And so that was a pivotal moment. Then I went through high school and I had not learned about goals yet. And my junior and senior year of high school were horrible. I was rated first in the state my whole junior year. I ended up losing to the guy, Jerry Martin. He had the same birthday as me, Christmas Eve, 1969. And we had wrestled 5 times and I beat him every time. The state finals, by far the most important match of our history, he beat me in the finals. And that was a big deal. The next year, I lost first round. I was out and I was lost. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I went to the U of M. It was a crazy year. I didn't love that big college energy. And then I went to Mankato State, MSU. And the first thing the coach did was he gave us all paper and he said, everybody write down your goals. And I was like, I didn't really want to because it reminded me of homework. And I didn't like homework. I had ADD to the max. In fact, to this day, I recognize my ADD as one of God's best gifts to me. I love my ADD, right? So anyway, it was a Friday night. I put the paper and pen on my desktop, and it was nagging me because if it was for class, I would have just ignored it and not done it and then got a C so I could wrestle. But it wasn't for class. It was for wrestling. So Sunday night came along after a big party weekend, like every other weekend of my life at that time. And I said, okay, it's time to write my goals. And so I started writing. And there was prompting questions in the paperwork. What do you imagine is your highest and best potential for your college career? And I had never thought about that. I had never thought about my life 4 or 5 years from now. So I started writing based on the vision that I had as potential. And then I started re-engineering or reverse engineering the vision. And that was so amazing because by the end of my writing, I had written down that I wanted to be a 3-time All-American and national wrestling champion in college. And I handed my goals to the coach that before practice the next day, because we couldn't come to practice without the goals. And he looked and he smiled and he smirked and he sat back and he said, "These goals are kind of lofty, don't you think?" And then he proceeded to tell me that goals were meant to be something that we could achieve. Now, it was too late for anybody to convince me that I couldn't achieve that goal because I had already lived it. I had already visualized it. It had already inspired me. 4 years later, I ended up being a 4-time All-American and national champ, inducted in the National Hall of Fame because I created a vision for myself with his help. And that was the key. So what I compel to everybody out there is to create a vision of the future that feels good.
Now, one thing I wanted to talk about, because last night, because I knew we were going to talk, I love sports. I'm a big sports geek. So I was actually watching 30 minutes of Kobe Bryant, and he was talking about how when he had to make his game-winning shots, he said, "I already done it 1,000 times in practice. So now I just had to follow through what I always do. And and like he said, and Giannis, I can't pronounce his name, plays for Milwaukee. He said, sometimes you have to, people tell you to stay in your lane. I agree, but make sure that you are dominating that lane. Yeah. Make sure you are, even the player said, I may not be great at threes, he said, but I can dominate the boards. And I think that's a bit same thing with wrestling, because of course, University of Minnesota had some amazing wrestlers go through there. But wrestling, it's man on man. If you get pinned, it's your fault. And I think like I've interviewed a lot of Navy SEALs, Delta Force, a lot of people that have made it to very successful in life, and they said it was the wrestling match that actually made them mentally strong, because a lot of times during Thanksgiving is when the matches are, and you're sucking on ice cubes and eating chicken, and everybody else is having Thanksgiving meal, and you got to cut weight. So talk to us about that mental strength that you got from wrestling on the mats.
Well, so you said while you're talking there, you mentioned how it's a one-on-one sport, and that's what's so profound about taking full responsibility for everything in my life. And that's the number one thing wrestling taught me is there's no excuses. In fact, the people who used excuses were the losers. It was always the ref's fault or this or that or all sorts of bunch of bullshit. I am, and this is the most empowering thing that we could ever say to ourselves, is I am 100% able to respond to the circumstances of my life. Nobody else is going to come and save me. It's up to me to do what I'm responsible for, and that's myself and my kids. Right. And then once you've got that under control, and control is maybe the wrong word there, but once you're feeling comfortable in your ability to secure your own life and that of your family, then we can step out from that and start helping our community. And then once our little short, our close community is served, then we can step out from that and help our bigger community. And then pretty soon, and this is what I've been joyfully obsessed with for 15 years, is how do we change the world? And when somebody asks a question infinitely all day long, every day, that answer starts becoming clearer and clearer and clearer. And this goes with everything in life.
All right. So now I got a question to ask, because, like I said earlier, most of our listeners are either veterans, first responders, or ex-athletes. And for me, I attempted suicide Memorial Day 2012 because I got hurt on duty and they medically discharged me. And they said, "You're no longer Sergeant Kaufman." Well, if I'm no longer Sergeant Kaufman, who am I? So that scared the bejesus out of me. And that's the day I attempted suicide. Thank God it didn't go through. But I found that most successful people, even even Kobe, Michael, you know, they sometimes go into a deep, dark depression when, like, even if you're a wrestler, when you have to hang up your singlet, you're no longer a wrestler. Now you got to, people are, what was it like hanging up or retiring, and you're no longer the wrestler, Jim? Now you're Jim.
Yes.
What was it like reinventing and reimagining your life after not wrestling?
That is such a beautiful and profound question. So for me, I was prepared to no longer be a wrestler. I had strategically and very consciously prepared for my next phase of life. Literally like 2 months after the national championship, I moved to Hawaii and I lived there as a bartender. My goal was to have a heck of a lot of fun and see the world, right? And it was, in other words, I created another compelling vision of myself in the future in a completely different context. And then after traveling around, I was actually in Surfers Paradise, Australia. I just had a backpack and I was by myself, just going around. I lived in Africa with the Maasai. I lived in many different places. And when I got to Surfers Paradise, I went to a college called Bond University. And I didn't pay to go there. I just walked into their library. And I was done bartending and I was done with that bar business. And I said, what do I want to do next? I had no idea what I wanted to do next. So I started studying the greats, The Psychology of Winning by Dennis Waitley. It still brings tears to my eyes. Honest to God, I just got emotional just saying it. Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, all of the great teachers in history, I studied and studied. Turn off your radio in the car and put on CDs and cassettes of something that makes you feel uplifted and inspired. And so I did that and I wrote my next set of goals. It was 10 years since the last time I wrote my goals. And I was pretty much broke. And I was traveling around the world on a backpacker's budget, working at a local bar on the beach in Australia, making, not very much money because they didn't give tips there. That drove me nuts. But I wrote my goals that I wanted to have $3 million in 3 years. And I had bartending experience with a teaching degree. So when I got home back to Minnesota and I told my friends about my goals, they all laughed at me and said I was crazy. Some of them actually got pissed off at me. And this happens quite a bit. When we start saying to our network, our friends and family who've known us forever, what our goals are, they might tell us, no, you can't do that. You got to get your mind right. You got to do, follow the crowd, follow the sheep. And I'm like, it was too late for them to dissuade me again. So anyway, about 3.5 years later, I started a mortgage company and the universe created miraculous synchronicities and cooperative coincidences everywhere. And 3.5 years later, we did $1.3 billion in sales starting from scratch in an industry that I had no idea about.
All right, hold on 1 second, because I want to go back there real quick. But first, I want to thank our sponsors. Thank you guys so much. Since this article came out, our book has hit #1 on Amazon for the second time in the recovery and addiction space. So if you know anybody struggling with addiction, if you know anybody struggling with mental health issues, please pick up the book. 100% of the proceeds, 100% goes to help people struggling with mental health and also homelessness issues. Also, if you guys want to start a show, we talked to StreamYard. StreamYard is actually going to offer you some cash to start your own show. So if you want to start your own show like this, StreamYard is going to pay you to start your own show. So write book or write show down below, and I'll get that information to you. But now, since I lost my vision about 18 months ago, I'm starting to get it back finally. My hearing got a lot better. And something you mentioned a couple times already is you wrote your goals down. Actually, writing stuff. Where a lot of people think, I'm going to put it in my notes on my phone. No, there's something about pen to paper, seeing you write your goals down that makes them real. So talk to us a little bit about that. When you wrote them down in college and then you wrote them down again, tell us a little bit about how it feels. Because I write my goals every day. And every night before I go to bed, what I say, I thank the Lord for my gifts in my life. But I write down my goals every day. So talk to us a little bit about that, how the greats teach you to write your goals down, not just put them in your phone.
Yes, it's profound. There is something beyond explanation that happens. In fact, Tesla said it best. He said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Now, I'll change one word in that: feel or experience in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And as you're literally writing your goals on paper, you want to visualize that you're already in that experience, that you're literally feeling the results of accomplishing the goal before you've accomplished the goal. And when you then write them down and sit with it, you might want to look at that, and you might want to take that vision that it helps to create in your mind and just sit and breathe it in. Breathe in and feel where you're tight. And then as you exhale the tightness and feel the frequency and vibration of the universe. There's something so profound. Like as I do that, I become aware of more things. I can feel the vibration in my hands intensely. And then when you create the vision and then you feel the experience of living in that vision, then something happens. And this is also scientific. It's not just woo-woo. It's not just written about in the Bible and all these different amazing teachers throughout history. In fact, Napoleon Hill said, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Sit with that for a little bit. Napoleon Hill was the first person to study. He was commissioned by, I think it was Carnegie, to study the most successful people in the history of our world and to dig deep into their minds and find out how they did what they did. And after he made a lifetime of studying these people's successes, he deducted whatever your mind, whatever my mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Well, then the next logical question is, what can I conceive and believe? And this is where you might start by conceiving that the particular thing, but you might not be able to believe it. But once you start conceiving it and you start meditating on it and picturing yourself already living in that, then you will start to believe it. And as you start to believe it, then it will expand and get better and better and better and better. And there's no limit to the betterness. And I've been 15 years obsessed with this notion that whatever I can conceive and believe it, I can achieve. And I now believe that through my actions, which is the action of collaborating with people like yourself, Richard, and everybody else listening, through helping to inspire collaboration, that we are going to create a world of epic freedom, epic abundance. It's already happening on a massive scale. In fact, we launched 18 months ago with Del Bigtree on the Highwire with 3 people in my company. Now we have 1,300 people, and we are helping people grow food in 15 countries and almost every U.S. state. And food forests everywhere equals freedom. And we'll get into that.
Yep. So, but now you also said something earlier. There's people that might even be in your own household that don't understand your journey. And it doesn't mean they're good, they're bad. It just means they don't understand it. And it's okay, because in the end, I know it's me and my maker, and it's my journey. People don't have to understand my journey. You know, you want to come with me, hop on board, hop on train. But a lot of people are not going to understand your journey because it may be different from outside the norm. Like for me, I want to be the #1 podcaster in the world, and I want to help 1 million people change their lives. And a lot of people don't like podcasts or don't even know what the hell a podcast is. And that's okay. It's my journey. So you talk about what you said, because a lot of people would write their goals down. They would tell it to their cousin Frank, and their cousin Frank would laugh at them. And then they would probably say, yeah, Frank, you know what? You're right. That's probably a stupid idea. Then rip it up and then go on with not achieving their goals. So talk about that.
Thank you, because it's really important that we bust through that problem right away. And a lot of times it's our best friends. It's our friends that have been resonating with us and vibrating with us and really in our sphere forever. Our parents, our brothers and sisters, those are the first people that are often the first ones to try to throw a monkey wrench in your plans. And this is so important to recognize. Number one, the first presupposition of neurolinguistics is everybody does the best they can based on their BS, their belief systems, their bad science, their bullshit, whatever it is in their mind, whatever identity, whatever thing that they connect with, the best they can do. So I don't blame them. I don't hate them. I don't get pissed at them. Sometimes I get pissed for a second and then I take a breath and I go, wait a minute, I'm pissed. And me being diseased is my disease, my disease. So I stop and I let them go. I don't say let them go like I never talk to them again. I just let go my attachment to their BS. And that is so important for people in the world today. Let go of our attachment to other people's BS. We know better. And we don't have to convince anybody. Instead, we have to convince ourselves by feeling it. And then through that feeling, the next step is inspired action. Action that's done out of stress or out of fear or out of scarcity will lead to more stress, fear, and scarcity. Action that's done because you're inspired to take that action will not only lead to your cup running over, but it will also help other people see what's possible.
All right, I also want to talk, for 1 second. I know that the people are listening to this, or the people that, when I go speak live, I know that from people that have worked with Tony Robbins, Gary Vaynerchuk, Ed Milet, that 97% of the people that go to an event are not going to act upon it. But there's 3% that will act upon it. So talk to us, because you could have written your goals down and never acted upon it. And a lot of times, like we got our New Year's resolutions, we write them down, but we don't put action behind the writing of the goals. So talk to us what it was like the day and the day after you wrote your goals down.
Yes. I want to give a little credit to Tony Robbins. I haven't been as impressed with him lately because I think he could have a bigger voice towards freedom lately, but he has done a lot for me. I went to Date with Destiny and a couple other of his programs. And the most important thing I did at any of his programs, which you could do right now at home, you don't have to go anywhere, is I created 2 motivations. I created a moving towards motivation, a positive, inspired motivation, and I also created a moving away from motivation. And I'll get specific on what that was. I imagined myself as laying in the gutter. I've got 4 daughters who are my primary motivation in life. I've got many motivations, but they're my first go-to motivation when I want to get my ass moving. And I imagine myself laying in the gutter, beat up and complete failure. And I imagine my daughters looking at me as a failure, and I could bring tears to my eyes just thinking about it. And then I stepped out of that into the present where I was at the time. I stepped into the present. And now this is also important. It's kind of technical, but it's easy for everybody to understand, is we have what's called a timeline in our imagination. Right? And I created a timeline where the past was behind me. Now, a lot of people, especially with PTSD, their past is in front of them or inside of them. And that is so destructive if you have pain when you're imagining your past. So for everybody listening, I want you to take the picture of the past. If it's a bright, colorful, moving picture, I want you to make it a black and white picture and put a frame around it, right? Now, I want you to turn that picture to glass, and I want you to throw that picture on the ground, and it's shattered, and now sweep that picture under the rug. And I want you to turn the other direction. And now I want you to create a vision for yourself that's empowering, that makes you feel good. I want you to start taking steps in that direction. Now, if you're motivated by self, then you will just do this because it's good for you. If you're motivated, if you have kids or if you have family or friends, or if you care about the world in a certain way, then stack on the motivations. All of the reasons why moving in an inspired, joyful way forward, away from that past picture, are important. Start stepping into your present moment timeline, and then create and have that compelling vision always out there in the future. And take a step at a time and feel the energy rise as you take a step towards that vision. And then step right into the vision. And then I'm like, I feel like I could float right now because I'm in the vision that I had created for myself back then. Step into that vision. And then here's what happens. You know, the wisdom, God or source, nature, whatever you believe to be true. I like to call it God for lack of a better word. I know that word has a lot of connotations and meaning, but I just call it God, right? The gap between your thoughts, between the programs in your mind that are often placed there by other people who want to control you, that gap is where God is. That gap is where the wisdom is. So be aware of the gap in between the thoughts. And then when you get inspired ideas that make you feel good, that's the path to your own love and joy and to the success and wellness of every part of life.
I love it. Now, something that I was taught by one of my mentors, for me, you know, the past doesn't exist anymore. The future doesn't exist. Only today, only being present at this moment is what actually exists. And if I want a better future, I got to be the better present. And I believe that our children deserve our presence more than our presents. So I just wanted to put that out there for somebody, that somebody needs to hear that today. But okay, so now we fast forward.
I just want to confirm that, brother. I love what you just said. I agree 100%. Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. I listened to that tape thousands of hours in my car and everywhere. The Power of Now exemplifies what you just said. It's beautifully and true.
I love it. So now, like I said, you know, now we're going to fast forward. You know, the company's crushing it. You're at what, 1 point something billion dollars. You know, I've met a lot of CEOs. They get fat, dumb, and happy. They get shiny object syndrome. You know, because now you're looking at the nicer cars, the nicer houses, your nicer secretaries, and all of a sudden they lose everything. Like I had David Meltzer on the show. At age 29, he lost over $100 million, but now he's got a $20 billion a year company because he had to turn back and say, all right, prioritize my life. What's a priority in my life? So talk to us about not, you know, being successful, but not getting fat, dumb, and happy and having shiny object syndrome.
So I did $1.3 billion in sales, and then I spent 15 years. When I learned what was going on in the world, I became obsessed because I learned two things. I learned that there are wicked entities, people that are controlling the mind. You know, Goethe said, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. I learned who was controlling the system. I also learned permaculture, which is the study of sustainable regenerative agriculture. And I learned both those two things at the same time, and it got me so passionate and worked up that I spent all my money. I literally went 2 years ago. I was beyond broke. I was $80,000 in debt. I had some land in Costa Rica that was just, anyway, long story on that. But I went from very wealthy. I lived on a motor yacht, 42-foot Carver motor yacht. I had the shiny objects. I had all of them. And they did not bring me joy at all. They brought me joy for temporary. Like, oh, I just bought a new car. I was happy. Just bought a new boat. I was happy. What I learned from the process of losing everything was the most profound learning of my life. It was the best thing that it could have ever happened to me. And so now with this new entity, I'm going at it completely in the energy of service. Service is the most incredible thing we could ever do when it serves humanity. So that's the whole foundation of our company, is the voluntary exchange of value. Like in our company, we don't have patents. We don't have NDAs. We don't have non-competes. We don't have any hooks because we're about permaculture. We're about ethics. We're about serving the world in the most logical and beneficial way that we can find to do so. And that is so simple. And I'll get into the simplicity of it right now. There are 44 million acres of lawn in the United States alone. When we convert 30, 40, 50% of our lawn, which takes more poisons, more chemicals than any other crop and does not provide food for people, when we convert, let's say 50% of the lawn, our ornamental plants into edible plants that take less maintenance than a lawn. And this is where people's minds get blown. You can have a 1/4 acre lot and provide all the food you need for your family to survive on a 1/4 acre and have it be perennial plants that are low maintenance, if any. That will change all of the nasty shit in the world: cancer, diabetes, heart disease, mass extinction, deforestation. It will literally reverse all of the negative trends, and it makes sense for us on every single level. So that's the idea whose time has come. I just wanted to go off on that.
No, and I love that because my dad came from Italy, to where if you wanted fruit, he would go out in his backyard, pick figs, pick stuff, and then every day they would go down to the market and buy fresh fruit and buy fresh fish, and there was such a low rate of diabetes, cancers, because they were eating from the ground, but also it was just kept coming back every year. Even more and more figs every single year would come back. So talk to us a little bit about that, because I think, like my wife, we have a garden and she has plants, and it's great when she's like, I want to go get some thyme. She just goes out to the yard and grabs some thyme. She don't have to go to the food store and pick up thyme. We're actually growing it in our backyard, and it's so much cheaper, than buying it at the store. So talk about that a little bit, and where did this idea come from?
So the idea came, so Bill Mollison and David Holmgren are the founders of permaculture. They created the word. Now, permaculture, it means permanent agriculture or permanent culture. And this is the most, it's ancient. It's the Garden of Eden, basically. It's been forever. The problem, in Kissinger back 50 some years ago, he said, if you want to control nations, control oil. If you want to control people, control food. This isn't just the ramblings of some random dude. It is the strategy spoken by the guy who is in charge of implementing this strategy, the guy that has met with every US president, and the guy that appointed Klaus Schwab to the WEF. This is not just random. So that's the problem. In permaculture, we look at what is the problem, because once we understand the problem, then we can turn the problem into the solution. The problem is centralized poisonous food. That's the underlying problem, which creates a dis-ease and disease on every level in our planet. Diabetes, heart disease, cancer, mass extinction, deforestation. It all comes from the agriculture that is pervasive in our world right now. Monocultures are unnatural and they're destructive as hell, right? Whereas, and this is where it gets magical, a perennial food forest, which is layers of food, roots and tubers underground, your herbaceous layers, mushrooms, and a lot of herbs, your shorter shrubs, your taller shrubs and food producers, your shorter fruit trees and your taller fruit trees, and then the vines that go up all your fences and fruit trees. When you have a food forest in the ground, you could literally set it and walk away for 50 years. In fact, your great-great-great-grandkids could come, and if nobody cut it down, which has been happening all over the world, by the way, by the controllers, if nobody cuts down that food forest, then you can come back 100 years later, and not only is it still there, but it has expanded exponentially. That's the way we are meant to live in our world.
And, and I love it. And as you're sitting there talking, now I'm going to say something to you guys that's probably going to be very controversial, and that's okay because it's my show. I was with GNC for over 30 years, and there's been studies shown that vitamin B17, which is apricot seeds, was shown to cure cancer 100% of the time, and it's illegal in our country to get vitamin B17. Makes you think. Also,
Sure.
now a lot of people say, okay, you know, a lot of people are coming down with liver cancer, liver problems. People don't realize that if you take higher dosage of milk thistle, it could actually help regenerate your liver, and you don't have to get on those liver pills. But the government don't want to hear that. So, you know, a lot of what you're talking about, you know, if they're not making money off of it, they don't want any part of it, right?
The dis-ease industry is the biggest industry in the world, held up by the other biggest industry, right? And so you're absolutely right. The word legal at one was the undoing, and you can look this up. The undoing of God's law is the word legal. It's not lawful. Lawful is God's law. Lawful is ethics. Lawful is do no harm, right? So we have been convinced and coerced into doing things that are not natural. And they have billion-dollar marketing budgets, a lot of these companies. They have people in their labs that put the right amounts of salts and sours and sweets together to trick your mind to never stop eating these potato chips and so on. Where if you're eating a fruit, you have a certain amount of fruit and your body clicks off and says, I don't want no more of that. Where if you're eating a chip, you have to use effort. I do. I love chips. I have to put effort into putting the bag of chips away, right? And that is by design, and it's an unethical design, but that's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but it is what it is. So to hate the people that are doing this is our hate. So we simply turn our energy away from those people and those entities, and we turn our energy towards natural systems again. And then, like Hippocrates said, let thy food be thy medicine, let thy medicine be thy food.
Now, something that because now once I knew we were going to start talking, I try to do a lot of my own research. You know, everybody's talking so crazy about the ozone layer and all that. I'm like, so why don't we just plant hundreds of millions of trees in areas that nobody's using anyway to create more oxygen, you know, to actually help the ozone? Or am I just crazy in thinking that?
So when we expose the poison producers and take out the poisons, that's job one. If that's all we did, our world would heal. But when we add a thoughtful permaculture design, a food forest design to that, now we literally design in a community, a fabric of freedom in our landscape. And you're right. The supply chain, food comes from 1,500 miles away in the United States on average. Our farm to table is 1,500 miles when you should be able to walk outside your back door and get all the food you need. Now, for people in Minnesota, my mom grew up on a farm. They produced all the food they needed. They didn't have running water or electricity. Right? It's absolutely doable in every zone around the world. Some zones are just harder than others. And some zones you have to learn canning and storage and dehydration, where here in Florida, you don't. Right? There's food all over all the time if you plant the right variety and the right species according to the zone.
You know, but also, you know, because now, like I said, we're talking about that, and I started looking around and I started paying attention, because now, you know, once we know we're going to be talking about something, you start paying attention to a little bit about a lot more. And then because I'm using the reticulator activating system in my mind that we always talk about on the show. And I started hearing a lot more about co-ops, community gardens, or fresh markets using, local produce. So, I think once we start looking for this stuff, it's going to start appearing. And that's when it makes a little bit more sense in our mind. Because like you said, when we use our RAS, whatever we find, whatever we look for, we're going to find. So if somebody's, well, you know what? I live in an apartment. I can't do it. Yeah, but there's somebody down the street that has a garden that they're willing to maybe do a co-op with you, or there's a fresh market somewhere where you can do a lot more shopping than buying from the canned goods, right?
That's absolutely right. It's everywhere. Once your Raz starts seeing the possibilities, and that's why I love the Hugo quote, the idea whose time has come, and it's going exponential. This past weekend, we installed a large food forest at a school, and they were so excited. It was this is already creating waves around the world. Thousands and thousands of people have now seen this food forest installation at a school, and we've also brought the school the curriculum so that they can actually teach kids. And then the founder of the school, she wants to create what we call a Freedom Farm Academy, where the kids are actually propagating the plants and then helping the community grow food, acting as a nursery, which is also, it's an incredible opportunity for the kids to learn real world business while they're helping their community become completely food self-reliant.
And I love that. And like I said, when I was with GNC, I would always, if I had somebody that would come in with allergies, I would tell them, you need to start eating some locally grown honey. And it was amazing. Maybe 85% of those people that ate the locally grown honey, their allergies went away because it was something, that was natural that, you can use. So now if somebody says, okay, I'm Joe, I live in New York, I'm in Jersey, Jersey, New York. Some people can actually, even if you have a window, you can actually start growing little stuff, even in your windows, or even like my wife has stuff in our house now, all different plants. It's amazing. But it's nice when I wake up in the morning and I see plants in our house that are growing. It makes you feel alive. It makes you, not feel like you're depressed. And we're still inside. So talk goes for those people that say, well, I'm just in an apartment, I can't do anything.
Yeah. Well, as you were talking, I got a vision of your house, even though it's not a correct vision, but just the vision of plants around. Plants create an energy field that is actually studied. And there's actually people who put music to this energetic field, right? It's pretty amazing. Plants also filter the air. They provide transpiration and humidity in the air. And of course, they provide food. And the function of beauty is one of the most important functions. So plants are the ultimate stack of functionality, right? The cannabis industry has taught us how to turn our closets into grow rooms, right? You can go cannabis or you can grow sweet potatoes. There's infinite amounts of stuff that you can grow in a closet or in part of your bedroom. And then let the plants be our teachers. They're the best teachers we could ever have.
And I love that. And, and like you said, some things grow natural to Florida. You can grow freaking oranges like crazy. But, if you're trying to grow those same oranges in Idaho, it ain't going to work. So you have to go with, like we were talking about earlier, with, stay in your lane, even in your health food lane. If you grow up in New Jersey, you're not going to be able to have the great fruit that we have in Florida. But we also have stuff here that grows better here than in Florida, correct?
Oh, that's exactly right. In fact, the first thought in a permaculture design is agricultural zone. That's the most important thing because there are lots of plants. My buddy in northern Minnesota has 300 different species of edible plants growing in a perennial food forest in northern Minnesota. Here in Florida, we've got about 250 species currently in Florida, and there's only 5 maybe that are crossovers, like the mulberry, right? Mulberries can grow in both places, and even different types of mulberry. So the first thing is, what zone are you in? And then the second thing is, what does your land look like, north facing, south facing? What is your water situation, which is really a key thing in permaculture? And then what are your vision? What's your desire? And then we take all of the information, that and a lot more, and we put it into a custom landscape design to design your property to be productive. And then the next layer is anybody who wants to be in the business of helping your community grow food. We have created a business model that's scaling globally. And then we have created a Freedom Farm Academy where people can become demonstration sites of what it is like to live completely off the grid in paradise, and then use that knowledge and that wisdom to show and inspire other people to do the same. And when we have mass adoption of this logical way of living, we're free.
And I love that. And I want to, I want to find out how we get in touch with you real quick. But a friend of mine, his name is John Lee Dumas. He's got one of the top podcasts in the world. He lives in Puerto Rico, where he moved to Puerto Rico. His house is 100% solar. He gathers 7 or 8 gallons of water every day, from however they do it. But he's living totally off the grid because that's what he chooses to do. So it's possible to do this, but you have to get the right information, and you guys seem to have the right information. So how do we find you, and how do we get the information, and how do we support your mission?
Oh, thank you so much. You find us at foodforestabundance.com. My direct email is jim@foodforestabundance.com. And we're all over social media. I've been on about 300 podcasts in the last 18 months. We have TV shows. We have 3 Emmy Award winners on our marketing team, right? And I use the word marketing. That's such a cheap word. We are inspirers of a shift that's going to change the world. That is changing the world. And thanks to the permaculture giants who have taught us all these techniques, we're taking what they've already proven. Everything I'm saying is not a hypothetical. This is a fact. It's demonstrated all over the world, where you can take the permaculture principles and create this type of abundance on your landscape. Even in the desert, in the mountains, we have customers in Alaska and Arizona and Egypt. All over this can be done.
All right. So now, I always like to end with some actionable advice. If there's somebody out there that are saying, okay, I want to ease my way into this, I want to, take the steps before I take the elevator. What is something they can do? Is there like certain place you can go to figure out what plants would be good for your house or for your apartment? Is there a certain way to get that information?
Absolutely. And this is all over social media. If anybody wants to start growing food and you're on a tight budget, you can take $20 or $50 and go to the store and go to the non-GMO section, right? The organic section. And you can start buying food that has seeds in it, avocados and grapefruit and watermelons. And you name it, cucumbers and tomatoes. And you can take those seeds out of those plants. You can go on YouTube and you can look up how do I propagate tomato seeds from start, right? And guess what? All of the answers are there. So you don't have to spend any extra money. You can still eat the tomato. You can just save a couple dozen seeds, and now you've got your own tomato garden, right? You can go and you can dig free dirt out of the local park, right? You can find, hopefully it hasn't been poisoned. But my point is, you can start on very little budget. Or if you want to speed up time, then that's where the permaculture design process is very valuable, because it's a very thoughtful look. It's like architecture for a home. You would never build a home without architecture. I would never build a food forest without a design that maps out the proper guilds and communities of plants that actually support each other.
All right. So can you give us that email? Give you that website again?
Yes, it's foodforestabundance.com. And then on social media, Food Forest Abundance, all over the place.
Jim, brother, I'm so grateful that we finally got together. I know we played phone tag, a lot of stuff going on. So I just want to say thank you, brother. I'm so truly grateful for you.
Oh, thank you. I'm grateful for you, Richard. Man, I love what you're doing. And let's help these vets and everybody out there listening find a future, design a future that's compelling and joyful. And then once we serve ourselves, we can start serving the world. And it's a beautiful process.
I love it, guys. So make sure you check out Jim all over social media. Guys, like my t-shirt says, today I decide. Guys, today you can make that decision. Do I want to be healthy or do I want to be unhealthy? Because as I was once told, health and wealth go hand in hand. You cannot be wealthy if you're not healthy. So please make that decision today to decide I want to be healthy. And with that, make sure you're also subscribing, because we're dropping information here that you're not finding on any other platform. So make sure you leave a comment below if what your favorite kind of fruits are to grow. Let us know so maybe we can spread that information to other people. All right, Jim. Love you, brother. Have an
Love
amazing
you.
week.
You too, buddy. Thank you.
All right, guys, remember vertical momentum. The only way to go is up, and I will catch you guys tomorrow. Brother, you are amazing, brother.
Oh, thank you, Richard. God, that was fun, huh?
Yeah. And I had you on the show before.
Yeah.
You were on my old show where it was just audio.
I remember that. I do. I knew your name. I'm like, I know Richard, but I didn't know exactly where until now. Yeah.
So now a lot of people are one way on social media. They're another way when the camera's off. Me, I'm the same goofy guy no matter what. So what can I personally do to help support your mission?
I would love to meet